How do you know whether it's too early to start building your no-code app or whether maybe it's actually already too late? Here's the thing, when you're building a no-code app, you have to decide when to transition from your idea stage into actually developing the product and putting in the time, money, and energy necessary to do that. Now, if you start your actual development too early, you risk not doing your due diligence with your app idea. On the other hand, if you start that development too late, you risk unknowingly procrastinating with your development, which can lead to a whole host of other issues down the road. Not doing proper due diligence means potentially wasting that time, money, and energy that's going to go into the development of your no-code app. And unknowingly procrastinating could lead you into developing too much of your app too early, and therefore launching the wrong product to your users. And even the wrong version of the right product is still going to be the wrong product. So when should you transition from your idea into the actual development of your version 1 no-code app, knowing that your time, your effort, your money is going to be well invested? In this video, we're going to clear all of that up because you shouldn't be making this decision based on your gut, and you also shouldn't be making it just based on idea validation alone, which might seem a little bit weird. But like I said, we're going to break all that down. Stick around until the end because we also have a template you can copy for yourself and use once you understand these steps. I'm Kristen. I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps. We help non-technical entrepreneurs build custom apps so they can launch their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding. All right, let's kick things off on the iPad so we can break this down in a really structured way. In order to understand when you should actually start building your first version no-code app, you first need to understand the steps it's going to go through throughout idea validation, development, and launch. The reason being, unless you understand the granular goals of each of those steps, you won't know when to logically start building your app because you have to be at a place where you can start aiming for each of those granular goals. If you're not ready, then you shouldn't start building your app. Okay, so on the iPad here, you see 5 stages. Now, this is very simplified, but essentially you're going to go through market research and idea validation with your app. And then once you complete that stage, you're going to go into version 1 product development. This is where you're building the first version of your no-code app. Once that version 1 is built, you're going to go into pilot testing. This is where you get a specific type of user feedback. And then you're going to go into your first round of iterations using that feedback, and then you'll continue to roll out the app from there into your growth stages. Now, there's a lot that goes into growth, but again, we're simplifying this so you can understand when to even kick this cycle off with your app. Now, we're not going to do a deep dive into idea validation in this video. We have another video on that, so definitely check that out. Instead, we're going to talk about the goals you are aiming to achieve within that market research and idea validation stage so you can confidently move into version 1 product development. But there are really 2 things you're going to be looking for at this stage. First, you're going to be looking at the problem you want to solve and the outcome you want to enable users to achieve. And then you want to decide on the initial feature set that is absolutely critical in solving that core problem and enabling that core outcome. Now, this stage, or really whenever entrepreneurs are right here, so they're at the tail end of that stage, they've gathered their validation, that is when they come to us when they're interested in getting help with their apps. And one of the questions they sometimes ask is, what if whenever I start my development, my feature set needs to change based on my market research? Now, if someone at this stage right here, where they're about to move into their version 1 product development with us, if they're asking that type of question, then I know they're not technically at this stage. They're actually still right here. And when that's the case, it's not smart to move into the development of your version 1 no-code app, because even if you validate that there is a problem you can solve and there is an outcome that you can enable, if you don't yet understand how you're going to solve that problem and enable the outcome, then you don't actually have idea validation. Yes, you might have problem validation, but not idea validation. So before you move into your product development, you need to have that problem and outcome identified, and you need to have the core feature set identified. Now, we're going to come back to this and go over a few more questions you can ask to make sure you're confidently moving into the next stage. But first, I want to touch on version 1 product development. Oftentimes, it's easy to feel like you only get one shot. And if you don't get this first version of your product perfect, then that's it. It's kind of like a make it or break it product. But in reality, that's not actually the case. With the version 1 of your product, you're still very much in the testing phases. And so let that eliminate some of the pressure you're feeling and also help you understand when you should and shouldn't start development. In our Built to Scale mentorship program, we help people create and launch their version 1 of their no-code app. And the goal of this stage is to create that feature set that solves the problem and enables the outcome. But while those are the more tangible goals, they're not the ultimate goal of this product development. Ultimately, what you want to achieve right here is successful alpha testing with your no-code app. Successful alpha testing means this core feature set works from start to finish. In other words, a user can come on board and navigate through each step or process within your app and come out on the other end successfully. To be clear, alpha testing doesn't mean that users can adopt your app or even that users can solve their problem with your app. Alpha testing simply means that the core feature set you've created works from a functional standpoint. Now, this is a step we actually handle for our own clients, and it enables them to move forward into the more important step of pilot testing, which comes next. Now, we're just about to jump back over to idea validation and go through some of those questions that I mentioned. But the reason we're working our way all the way up to pilot testing is because the goal of pilot testing is going to help you better understand when to actually start building your app and really just more confidently move into the development than you otherwise would. In order to get to this stage where you can move into actually iterating and then rolling out and growing your app is product validation. Now, to be clear, that is not product adoption, and that's also not product expansion. We're specifically looking at product validation. Now, this is really important to understand because the reason why some people start building their apps too early and ultimately waste time, money, and energy is because they have that problem and outcome validation, but they don't have their feature set validation. But the reason why people start building too late and ultimately unknowingly procrastinate is because oftentimes they think that launching their version 1 app into its first round of testing means they have to launch the perfect product right off the bat. It's their only shot. And that's not the way it works. You're actually looking for product validation, which means you are validating that feature set that you decided would solve the problem and enable the outcome. That means that your first launch doesn't need to be the perfect product, and it probably won't be. You're still very much in a testing phase, and testing with the version 1 of your no-code app gives you the opportunity to intake feedback and iterate the product and ultimately learn how or if it's going to serve your market at scale. And so if you are already thinking about product adoption and product expansion, and that's what you're trying to figure out at this stage, then you're waiting too long to build your app. All right, so let's actually zoom in to these sections right here so we can get really, really focused. You are too early to move into the development of your version 1 no-code app if you have not yet identified the problem and the outcome that you're going to be focusing on. You're also too early if you have not identified the features, the core features that are going to solve that core problem and enable that core outcome. Now, that being said, you are too late if you are spending so much time on these features that you are already thinking about product adoption and product expansion. Instead, the only thing you need to be thinking about with these specific features is product validation, meaning you are trying to prove that you can solve that core problem and enable that core outcome. That does not mean that you are doing that consistently. That doesn't even mean that users are taking the app and putting it in their real life scenarios and using it consistently like that. It just means that you are proving that you can solve the problem and enable the outcome. And if you can do that, then you can focus on doing it consistently. Then you can focus on doing it with a better user experience. Now, I want to get into a couple of specifics, like how many features should you have in that first version? And what are the other types of questions you should be asking to confirm that it is time to move forward and break ground on development? So let's talk about number of features, or really just the size of scope in the first place. Realistically, for the first version of your product, you should have a very small amount of features. 3 or 4, and 5 is really, really pushing it, but 3 or 4 core features should be able to solve the problem you've identified and enable that outcome. If you're building any more than that, then chances are you're solving too many problems up front, and really you need to validate that you can solve that first problem before you start adding on more. Okay, so what about the other questions you can ask yourself to confidently take that step from idea into development? The first one is really simple. Have you validated through your market research that people actually have this problem and want to achieve this specific outcome you're trying to enable? Now, that might sound kind of obvious, but there are a lot of instances where someone will come up with an idea first and then try to fit that idea into a problem and an outcome later. But you need to flip it around. So in that market research, make sure there's a need for the product. And keep in mind, market research can sound kind of big or overwhelming, but it can actually be pretty simple. It mostly involves having conversations with people. Okay, now the second question you want to be asking is whether you validated your target market's desire for that solution and their ability to pay, because maybe you've identified a problem and you know that it needs to be solved, but your target market might not really care about solving it. So while you know they need the solution, they might just not want it. Now, if they do want it, you have to make sure they also want to pay for it. And not only that, are they able to pay for it? Because you can have a great idea, you can identify a problem that is really severe and have a great feature set in mind, but if your target market doesn't want to pay for a solution to solve this problem they have, well, your app is not going to take off in the way you want it. Now, once you have all of those things and you have the answers to those questions, the last piece of this is going to involve a little bit of a mental game, to be honest. Keep this in mind. Just because you have idea validation, and you can have excellent idea validation, doesn't mean that when you get through the development of your no-code app and you start your pilot testing, that you are going to get the product validation that you want on the other side. And this is pretty simple, right? There can be tons of ideas and great solutions that just simply don't hit the market in the way you want and take off how you envision. And so in order to finally take that step from idea validation into product development, you need to personally have the confidence in investing your time, your money, and your energy into building out this product that you know is still ultimately going to have to go through more testing on the other side. So that in-between portion there involves stepping out and maybe pushing outside your comfort zone a little bit and deciding that the reward on the other side is worth the risk. This is true of any business venture. Now, there might be some people watching who are thinking, oh my gosh, I need to go through so much more validation. This is crazy. How could I ever move forward? But here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. You are using no-code tools to build that first product. That means you're not spending $100,000 on an MVP. You are going to be investing a fraction of the time, the money, and the effort to launch this first product in order to get that product validation on the other side. If you're watching this video, you probably are already thinking of the problem and the outcome. And The next thing you need to do before you can move into development is nail down that feature set. Now, this can be one of the hardest parts for people because in order to gain product validation, there needs to be some thought that goes into it. So you can't just decide on this feature set based on what you think is cool or based on what you would want to see. You really need to logically go through and pick out which specific features are going to solve this specific problem for your specific users and for the specific users who you're going to be bringing on board first. And those are different from users who would come months or years down the line. So to get clear on what those features should be and then move into product development, I want you to head to coachingnocodeapps.com/perfect-pilot. That link is down in the description below. This is a template that you can make a copy of for yourself, and there's a training that goes along with it, and it's going to help you take your app idea and take the problem that you're solving and extract the specific features that you must include in your first version app in order to get the product validation and the features that you should not include in that first version. So head to coachingnocodeapps.com/perfect-pilot, perfect-pilot. The link is in the description, and head into those next steps from here.